So we are in the middle of chapter 38 of the Guide for the Perplexed on page 377 in the Shlomo Vines edition. Uh, uh, it's part two of the guide, chapter 38. So Rambam is in the middle of describing how prophecy works and what prophecy is. And if you remember, in the beginning of chapter 30, the paragraph I'm going to start reading from, where we're up to, is where he starts saying, "Know that the true prophets." It's the second paragraph on page 277. But I just want to remind us of what he said until now in this chapter. He had said that a prophet is someone who is able to look at a situation and understand where that situation is going to lead, right? So in other words, what he did so far is there's more than that, but that's one step in the process, right? To produce a prophecy, to be a prophet, you have to be able to understand what the signs mean, right? That if you put A plus B plus C plus D, then the likelihood is that you're going to get E, right? And that's so a prophet is able to, if he sees a situation in front of him in the street, and he sees people doing this, and these are the influences and so on, then he concludes that the likely outcome is going to be something. So if you're noticing that the Rambam is taking a lot of this the mystery of prophecy, which one would think of as some spiritual revelation, and he's making it very he's fitting it into his cognitive model of how the human mind works, which is a scientific model, right? A somewhat of a scientific model, at least in his time. So he's able to see all these signs and then intuit from the signs what the result is probably going to be. That was the first point he made in chapter 38. The second thing he said, and this is one is extremely interesting and extremely insightful, and it's a lot deeper than it seems on the surface, is that a prophet has to have courage. Now, if you remember last time, Rambam gave some examples, and he showed how a prophet has to have courage. And on the surface, one thinks, well, the example of Ezekiel or Jeremiah is the classic example. He has to have courage because he has to say things, the courage to say things that people don't want to hear, right? And many prophets have suffered a lot because they said things that they people don't want to hear, right? You tell everybody you guys are up to no good. People don't want to change their ways, right? They like being the way they are. But the truth is that it's much deeper than that. And because the Rambam could have chosen many qualities, many good qualities that a prophet needs to have. Aside from courage, he needs to be kind, he needs to be empathetic, he needs to be, he could have picked a whole long list of personality traits that a prophet needs to have. Why did he choose just courage? And I'm going to venture to say, and you'll see, I'm going to develop this a little more as we continue reading today, that in order to be able to intuit from what one sees, right? And when one sees all the various circumstances that are in front of him and the things that are going on in the world, in order to come to the correct conclusions, one has to have courage. Because if you don't have courage, you see what you want to see, right? We all see the same situation. Why is it that the prophet is very smart, but there's other smart people looking at the situation, right? Why is it that the prophet is able to see the situation, understand it, and then conclude and give us a prophecy and tell us where these things are going to lead and where it's going to go? And why can other people not do that? Well, one of the reasons is because the Rambam told us that the prophet requires courage, right? Because you and I, when we see things, we draw the conclusions that we want to conclude. We see the things that we want to see. And if something's a little bit scary to us, if it doesn't look right, if it upsets us, either because it's a scary result and we just want to pretend it's not going to happen, or it's scary to us because it conflicts with our preconceived notions of what should be, right? We don't have courage, and then we don't draw the right conclusions. So that's why courage is the necessary second step. So number one, a prophet has to be able to see and understand everything that's going on and make logical, rational conclusions from that as to what then will result. And the prophet then also has to have the courage to make the right conclusions, right? Just to have the wisdom is not enough. He also has to have the courage. So this is where we're up to, and we're about to move on to so let me remind you again. So I might use these terms again. That ability to divine, right? Or you can better use the word intuit, right? From the circumstances that one sees, what the logical result is, that's the divination. Remember, that's the imaginative faculty, right? Remember in Rambam, we talked about this last time, what his cognitive model was. That would be something you would call it in modern psychological terminology, right? So the imaginative faculty is that part of our brain that interacts with the world around us, where we sense things, we see things, we smell things, we taste things, we hear things, we learn stuff from the world around us, right? That's the imaginative faculty. So the prophet is able to take all of that input and come up with and intuit and say, oh, if that's all that's going on, this is where it's going to go, right? And then he has the courage. Second step is he then has to have the courage to make the proper conclusion. And now we're about to learn the third step. So remember, the rational faculty, right, is, according to Rambam, is the part of us which we trained scientifically and logically. The rational faculty is the part of our brain which we used to learn about the world around us, to literally learn the laws of physics, to learn, and the Rambam, and that the rational faculty is what's receiving input from the ultimate rational faculty, which is God. Remember, the Rambam explained to us how the active intellect, right, which is what comes straight from God, from the highest spheres down from one sphere to the next sphere to the next sphere, all the way to the one in which we're living, into our brains. That's the rational faculty. But the rational faculty is is the third part in order to make a prophecy. So let's learn about that. So know that the true prophets indubitably, right, in order doubtlessly grasp speculative matters. In other words, speculative matters here, that's not the best translation. Here he means scientific matters, logic matters, a brain that works, that sees the truth, that by means of his speculation alone. However, a normal man, right, is by simply thinking is unable to grasp. Man is unable to grasp the causes from which what a prophet has come to know necessarily follows. You and I that aren't on the level of a prophet, our rational faculty isn't quite on the level where we know enough and understand enough about the world and about wisdom in general that we can make the kinds of conclusions that the prophet makes. This has a counterpart in their giving information regarding matters with respect to which man, using only common conjecture and divination, is unable to give information, right? In other words, just like I said before about divination, which was in the beginning, right? And I talked about how you and I don't necessarily have the same kind of ability to divine things from what we see around us that a prophet does. In the same way, our rational faculty isn't developed enough to draw the conclusions that a prophet is able to make. For the very overflow that affects the imaginative faculty, right? The overflow, that's the key word the Rambam uses when he's talking about the overflow that comes from God to our own intellect, to our active intellect, right? Through the active intellect into our rational faculty, right? And that then goes ahead and influences what our imaginative faculty, what kind of images our mind is making, with the result of rendering it perfect so that its act brings about, it's giving information about what will happen. And it's apprehending those future events as if they were things. I'm reading this, but I'm going to paraphrase it in a second in ways that brings it a little bit more down to earth. As if they were things that had been perceived by the senses and had reached the imaginative faculty from the senses. So that is also the overflow that renders perfect the act of the rational faculty. So what he's saying here is as follows. There's a three-step process. Remember, we talked about the step of divination, which is what the imaginative faculty is, the influence going into that imaginative faculty from the world around us, what we gain from what we see, what we hear. And then there's the rational faculty. It's our brain that has the power of logic and reason that's able to think things through, right? And that rational faculty then goes and influences the images in our mind and allows us to draw an accurate, real picture in the imaginative faculty. When all of those three things, and you have the courage to make the proper conclusions, when all of that comes together, then you have an image in your mind that's a prophecy. So here the Rambam just explained how, so that's why he told us in the previous chapters, a prophet has to be perfect rationally, right? He has to be educated and wise, right? And Rambam is going to emphasize that again very soon. And he also has to have the ability to see and hear and learn from everything that's around him. And he has to have the courage to be honest and true to draw the right conclusion. So all of those things together produce that image, and that image is a prophecy. So this is the truth that is believed by whoever chooses to be equitable towards himself, right? So if you choose to see the truth, you'll see that I'm right, is what he's saying. For all things bear witness to one another and indicate one another. This should be even more fitting for the rational faculty. In other words, the Rambam is really harping, he's driving this point in because he very strongly wants to debunk anyone who thinks that a prophecy can come to someone who hasn't went through this process of education of his rational mind and his imaginative faculty. There's several reasons for this, but the Rambam he has emphasized numerous times, we've learned this together tonight in the last few weeks, that that he doesn't believe, strongly doesn't believe that just anyone can be a prophet, right? That goes against other philosophers, including some Jewish philosophers who felt otherwise, that God can choose to speak to whoever he wants to, right? The Rambam emphatically doesn't believe that. And the second thing is, it's also a polemic against another religion, right? And this time it's particularly against the religion where the Rambam in other places, but he doesn't want to say it out loud, a particular prophet who wasn't known for his rational faculty abilities. And the Rambam is saying it without using his name, but most of the commentaries understand that the Rambam is directing this against them. Okay, and in the next chapter, when Rambam talks about the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's also to some degree a polemic against that particular prophet. So for the overflow of the active intellect goes into its true reality only, causing it to pass from potentiality to actuality. So what the rational faculty is, and that rational faculty is that which is being influenced by the active intellect, and so all the way up to God himself, right? It is from the rational faculty that the overflow comes to the imaginative faculty. So that all of that logic and reason and study and learning that you do then can be used to impress upon and overflow into the imaginative faculty, so that the images produced, right, are images that are true and that are correct and that are right and that are reasonable. How then can the imaginative faculty be perfected in so great a measure as to apprehend what does not come to it from the senses, right? Without the rational faculty being affected in a similar way. So just like the prophet is able to take what he sees from the senses, from the world around him, and use all of that information and thereby produce a meaningful image that's not just above him, not just a crazy dream, right? He produces an image that's meaningful. The rational faculty also influences that image so that it's rational, reasonable, and most importantly, true, right? So without the rational faculty being affected in a similar way so as to apprehend without having be apprehended by the way of premises, inference, and reflection. Again, emphasizing that in order to perfect that rational faculty, one has to have those things. Premises, meaning Rambam is hinting towards the exercise of logic, training yourself in logic, training yourself in inferences. In other words, what inference do I draw from the observations that I see? And reflection. These are the Aristotelian and methods of science, right? And reflection, then thinking about it. How does it work? Does it make sense, etc. This is the true reality of the notion of prophecy. And these are the opinions that are peculiar to the prophetic teaching. This is what Nevuah is, okay? So the Rambam explained to us what Nevuah is. So Nevuah then is, remember Rambam told us 2 chapters ago that Nevuah is technically something which is achievable if you go through these steps, and anyone that has these abilities and goes through these steps will be on the level of prophecy. Whether or not he actually gets a prophecy, that's where God comes in, right? No, right. In other words, that's where God says, "Okay, I'll talk to you now," or He might say no. right? In other words, but God will never do that, according to Rambam, if you haven't gone through the process. You have to go through the process. You can't just sit down and say, God, talk to me. That ain't going to get you anywhere, right? You got to go through the process, which is a long, arduous process that most people cannot achieve. In my exposition, I have put in the proviso that it refers to true prophets only. This is in order to exclude it from the people belonging to the third class. Remember, the last chapter, the Rambam had a third class of people who have a wonderful imagination. This, if you must see that this is a polemic against that particular prophet. Who had a wonderful imagination. He saw images and things and visions and sights and all kinds of stuff, but no rational faculty, no reason, no truth. There was nothing there. So those people, they have no rational conceptions at all and no knowledge. They never studied science. They never studied logic. They never sat down and thought about the kinds of things that the Rambam says a prophet has to think about, but only imaginings of them. But they have a wonderful visions of all kinds of visions of things that are going through their mind. Perhaps what these people apprehend are merely opinions. So what is it that they're seeing these wonderful visions? And occasionally these visions have some meaning, some purpose. Every once in a while they do say something which sounds wonderful or might even be true every once in a while, right? But their opinions but those don't come from things they actually learned from observation. Those are things that sit in the back of our mind. If you think about it, when we dream at night, what are we dreaming? What are the images that we have? There are things that we saw, right? Yesterday or the day before or last year or 10 years ago. We dream about things that we saw. We have visions about things that we knew, that we learned, right? So the Rambam is saying these people, they think those visions are new visions they're getting of a prophecy telling them about something that's going to happen, when really all it is some latent thought that's sitting in the back of their mind from some past event in their life, right? So they think they're getting a prophecy and a message from God, which teaches them something about the future, right? When in actuality, all they have in their brain are things that are hanging around from the past. So the Rambam says, and he gives an example. Accordingly, when they void and annul many of their imaginings, the traces and brain impressed their imaginings together with everything else that subsists in their imaginative faculty. They have all kinds of images and things they saw, because they do have a very lively imaginative faculty. They may be, if they were an artist, they'd be drawing incredible pictures with wonderful images, and it would be wonderful, right? But it doesn't say anything about the future. It doesn't say anything about what's going to happen, because in order to predict that, you need to have the things which the Rambam just described to us a prophet needs to have, and they don't have the rational faculty, right? Accordingly, when they void and annul many of their imaginings, when they blank out, right, they go into a trance, and they knock out all of the fluff that's going on, there's a few things floating in their heads that are these clear, wonderful visions. So I'm going to skip a sentence or two, and he says, to my mind, they may be compared to a man who had in his house thousands of animals. Imagine you lived in your house and you have like 60 pets. You have a cat and a dog and a parrot and the fish and the turtle and the rabbit and fill in the blanks. You have 100 animals. They're all hopping around the house, doing their thing. Your house is a big cacophony of all kinds of wonderful noises, and that's what he does. And then one day he opens the window, and everybody runs out except one rabbit sits in the corner and hangs out, right? So he looks and he sees a rabbit. All except one individual, they all went. The man remains alone with just that one rabbit sitting in the corner or whatever. The one pet decided to stay home, right? So he thought that now he's looking and he thinks that this rabbit is new, because before there was so much junk, so much craziness in his house, right? That he didn't even notice that he had a rabbit, right? He noticed the whole dog because it barked a lot. He noticed the cat because it jumped all over him. He might have noticed the bird because it was, I don't know, making a mess everywhere. But the rabbit was sitting in the corner. He didn't notice. Now, all of a sudden, he sees a rabbit. And ooh, right? He has the vision of a rabbit. So that's this guy's brain, right? He has so much stuff going on in there. And then all of a sudden, he goes to sleep. He goes into a trance. And one of those memories is hanging in his head. And he thinks it's new, but it's not new. It's something that he remembered from 10 years ago, right? It's not a prophecy. It's just some image that he has in his mind, and we all have images in our heads. So whereas that's not the case, the individual, it just happens to be the one that he's not, because when we go into a trance, we if we do it right, if you meditate on a thing, right? And anyone, I'm not an expert at this, but the little bit I've learned about meditation is you need to block out all the extraneous influences, try to concentrate on one thought and one idea. And then it's a beautiful experience because you can experience whatever that idea is from all kinds of different angles and learn about it, and sometimes work through psychological issues that way, right? But what you did was, it's not that idea is new. What you did was you managed to block out everything else. So this person managed to do that. But that idea isn't new. It's not a prophecy. It's something that was always there, right? This is one of the points that lead astray and cause perdition, right? This guy, he didn't come up with any new things, right? But it leads him astray because he thinks it's new and he teaches it as if it's a prophecy, okay? How many among those who have aspired to obtain discernment have perished through this, right? So many people are trying to attain discernment. Discernment means the ability to tell one thing from another, which is the opposite of what this guy did. They think they have discernment, but they don't. Hence, you will find that certain groups of people establish the truth of their opinions with the help of dreams that they have seen. They have these dreams. This is very, very much a polemic against that same prophet that a lot of people follow. So they have these dreams, right? And they think that, and they establish the truth because they had this vision. But the vision doesn't establish it as truth. To establish something as truth, a vision is not enough. You also have to have rational reason, education. It has to make sense. And you also have to have the courage to see the truth and make the right conclusions. All of the steps that the Rambam said. Thinking that what they have seen in sleep is something else than the opinion that they believe in or that they had heard while awake. They think it's some new thing when it's not. It's just something that just happened to be in their mind already. Therefore, one ought not to pay attention to one whose rational faculty has not become perfect. Don't listen if somebody comes to you. I assume that you know the prophet that I'm referring to, but he's directing, he's saying, right? Do not listen to someone who doesn't have a rational faculty that's perfect, right? So if you see a guy who comes to you and claims to be a prophet, he might be wearing beautiful robes and have a long beard and maybe hair going all over the place, and and there's candles burning, and he's telling you prophecies. If he's not smart and he's not educated and he's not morally upright and he's not all of the things that are necessary to be a prophet, don't listen to the guy. He's just a guy with a good imagination that's putting on a good show. Do not listen. Don't pay attention, says the Rambam, right? Who has not attained the ultimate term of speculative perfection. For only one who achieves speculative perfection is able to apprehend other objects of knowledge when there is an overflow of the divine intellect toward him. When that divine intellect, and we described how that works, comes to him, he then has the rational faculty to use that to discern the truth. And that Rambam is going to bring a pasuk from Tehillim, V'navi levav chachma, right? It is he who is in true reality prophet. It's explicitly stated, and the prophet possesses a heart of wisdom. Navi levav chachma means you can't be a navi if you don't have chachma. That's the Rambam's proof text from Tehillim, right? That what he's saying is right? You can't be a navi if you don't have chachma. And chachma means actual intelligence and actual wisdom. It says here, the Rambam emphasizes it again, that one who is a prophet in true reality has a heart of wisdom. This too ought to be known. Okay, so we've developed a really beautiful image of what prophecy is. And now that we've done this, well, I'll stop here because it's the end of this chapter for comments. The next chapter, Rambam is going to tell us what makes Moshe's, he's going to start talking about what makes Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah special. Now, he already mentioned like specific characteristics, and in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam talks a lot about specifically, Moshe was able to talk to Hashem whenever he wanted. He spoke upon him, face to face, not in a vision, all those things. Here he's going to go and be emphasizing a different aspect of it. It's going to be really cool. But let's first talk, if there's questions about this chapter, I'll open the floor.
Okay, can you hear me? I have.
Yes, I got you. Go ahead.
Okay, it's Jeff. I could understand why Maimonides might have qualified as meeting these criteria. Right. Greek and math and science, and even I'll give Moshe a break. I think he may have this tremendous rationality.
Right.
But when I think of the others, which I'm hardly an expert, Jeremiah and Isaiah, I don't know if Jonah is one of them.
Right.
I never think of them as having, for whatever reason, the superior ration. I can't think of Isaiah studying geometry or doing some of the things we've mentioned
Well,
here. And indeed, I don't know enough about them, but some of these others, Daniel and what a little I know. It just seems to me, if you will, counterintuitive to attribute to these lesser known prophets, other than the few I know, this
well,
kind of quality of knowing higher math and the things that Maimonides. So I'm just puzzled. And the other thing,
yeah.
in terms of his exposure, he lived in a Muslim world, right?
Right.
So maybe I'm missing some of the hints here, but if we're talking here about Muhammad,
Yeah.
I never, I don't know, I don't know. That's the only person that seems to be qualified based on the world that Maimonides was in, that he could
Right.
possibly be so upset about. So
Yeah.
without asking for the identity, I'm just opening
Right.
the door to whatever you want
Right.
to
Yeah.
enter.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously that's what he's referring to when he talks about that. And in other places, he doesn't. He rarely mentions it by name because it's too incendiary. So he,
I see.
but but there are places where he mentions that that's why that particular prophet is not true, right? Because basically the lack of reason, the lack of rationality, the lack of that type of education. That's really the Rambam's one of his main proofs. And when he goes on to talk in the next chapter about the uniqueness of Moshe and how the Torah can never be replaced, that's also polemic against both Christianity and Islam, right? It's also meant to it's I mean that's not the only purpose of these chapters. Obviously we learn a lot about what the Rambam at least teaches prophecy is and why Moshe and the Torah is so special, right? But it's clear that he's exposing here the Jewish view, right? He's exposing here as Judaism's most serious philosopher in history, right? He is laying out our case, right, for our religion against those other two major competitors that we have. So, and this, what we just learned, is very much what we just read was really directed against Muhammad, but the next chapter is a little bit more directed against Christianity. But I don't want you to think that it's only meant against them because there's a lot to learn. Even if those two religions didn't exist, this would still be a very valuable chapter to learn. But the other thing, the first question is this? It's unique. The fact that Rambam understands that a prophet is scientifically educated and rationally and logically, has worked through these things. It's not clear from the Torah, really. I mean, the Rambam went fishing for a pasuk in Tehillim, v'navi levav chachma, to back up his thesis here. I mean, that's not the only place where he backed it up from. Obviously, we've seen in other places he has other proof texts. But yeah, the Torah doesn't sit down and tell us that Yirmiyahu went to college and had a PhD in physics. It doesn't say that. And the truth is, and when Rambam says about Moshe Rabbeinu, we learned this together a while ago. It was in the first part. I can't remember exactly what chapter it was in, where he says that when Moshe was comprehended all of what is knowledge, and specifically scientific and philosophical knowledge that needed to be known, Moshe knew, right? Now, it certainly, I mean, Rambam brought psukim, which, could hint to this and that, but it certainly doesn't say that clearly in the pasuk. And realistically, if you and I sit down and think, 3,000 years, I don't know, whatever Moshe lived, 3,000 years ago, 3,000, couple hundred, whatever it was, right? Do we imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, going, to MIT, and it just doesn't, but 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 the Rambam did believe, obviously, not necessarily did he think that Moshe knew Aristotelian philosophy, because in the Rambam's world that was the height of knowledge, right? But he definitely thought that Moshe knew a lot of now. He specifically wrote he knew about science, he knew about the birds and the trees and we do have places where it talks about Shlomo knowing how the animals and wisdom. There are places, if you want to put together a case for it, you can. But you're right though. I mean, it's but according to the Rambam, to be a prophet you have to know knowledge, right? Maybe it's just the knowledge that's extant in that time, but logic, reason, the truth about what I really would say, I might be going on a little bit of limb here, is if you studied and you learned how to, like the Rambam said, you learned what were those three things? He said premises, inference, and reflection, right? You learn how to, premises is a reference to logic, right? If you make this premise and this premise equals this, right? Inferences means, if I see this, it means that, right? It's, inferring one thing from another. And reflection means thinking about them, thinking about what they mean, right? So that could be at every level. That I could imagine Yirmiyahu learning, right? Maybe he didn't read, the philosophy of Kant, and maybe he didn't know, Newtonian physics, but I could certainly see that he learned how to reason, right? So that's not so far-fetched, and to understand the world around him. Right? Any other questions on this chapter before I go on to the next one? Next, I'm excited to do the next one because it's really fun. But so the next one, after we have spoken of the quiddity, that's a word I wouldn't even have known. I had to look in the Hebrew to know what the word quiddity meant. So so it means the nature of prophecy, right? The mahut is of Kapach's Hebrew version of nevuah, right? So and so I have made known its true reality. I told you what prophecy is. And I have made it clear, and that we had learned a long time ago, that the prophecy of Moshe is different than all the others. So we shall say that the call to the law, in other words, the call to the Torah, the command to keep the Torah, must have only come from Moshe. It could not have come from any other prophet. Now read into here also, remember what we just talked about, this is a direct attack on another major religion. Like he attacked one religion before, he's attacking another one. No other prophet can come and tell us how we're supposed to live our lives except for Moshe. He's the only prophet that such a thing can come from, right? So, because only a prophet that has the apprehension of God that Moshe Rabbeinu had can tell us and give us a guidebook to tell us how to live our lives, okay? And that's a bold, big statement, so he's going to elaborate. So, for nothing similar to the call addressed to us by Moshe has been made before him, by any one of those we know who lived in the time between Adam and him. There were other prophets that preceded Moshe, right? Not a single one ever gave us a call and said, this is how you're supposed to live your lives. These are the rules. These are the guidebook. If you do this, you're okay. You'll live a life and that God wants you to live. No other prophet ever did that. Correspondingly, and nor was there any prophet after Moshe Rabbeinu that got up and told us how we're supposed to live our lives, right? Now, it sounds like a bold statement. This is many times we've had together where Rambam gets up and says, never did anyone besides this. So he's going to back it up a little. So correspondingly, it is a fundamental principle of our law, just like no other prophet, neither before Moshe nor after Moshe, ever told us how to live, gave us a Torah. Only Moshe gave us a Torah. So there never will be another prophet that will give us a Torah, because the only one who can give us a Torah is the one who has the apprehension of God that Moshe Rabbeinu did. It necessarily follows that in order to give a Torah, you have to have that kind of apprehension of God, and Moshe was the only one that ever had that. Hence, according to our opinion, so Rambam, the hints are getting more and more and more glaring that he's trying to explain to us as Jews, right, how we differ from those others, right? There has never been a law and never will be a law except the one that is the law of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the word law is Torah, is translated in Hebrew as Torah. So read it that way. There will never be a Torah except the one that is the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Of Moses, our master. The explanation of this, right? Okay, so I just made a big statement, but let me explain, right? According to what is literally stated in the prophetic books and is found in the tradition is as follows, right? It's stated throughout Tanakh that the Torah Moshe is the only one we'll ever get. He's going to bring a few proof texts, but there's many. And there's, of course, many places in Chazal, Rambam says in our tradition, which means in Chazal, that back this up, that make the statement. But what's the explanation? So not one of the prophets, such as Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Shem, Aver, Noach, Mesushelach, and Enosh, right, who came before Moshe, ever said to a class of people, he never came to a group of people and said, God has sent me to you and has commanded me to say to you such and such things. He has forbidden you to do such and such things and has commanded you to do such and such things. Why? They're prophets. They talk to God, right? Why is it that if this is what God wants us to do, and these are prophets that are receiving messages from God, why didn't they tell us this is how you're supposed to live, right? Right? Clearly, they didn't have the same apprehension of God that Moshe Rabbeinu did. So therefore, it had to take until Moshe Rabbeinu in order for there to be a prophet who can come and tell us this is the Torah, this is how you live. This is a thing that is not attested to by any text of the Torah. And that does not figure into any true tradition, right? In other words, what I'm telling you, you can see, you'll never find anywhere another prophet doing this. These men only received prophetic revelation from God according to what we have set forth. They did get revelations like I just described in the last chapter, what a nevuah is. They did receive such images, right? And which we'll say in a minute. He received a great overflow. For instance, Avram Avinu. He assembled people together and called them by the way of teaching and instruction to adhere to the truth that he had grasped. He learned the truth of God, and he taught the world about the truth of the one God. That image, that idea, that concept, he taught, right? Thus, Abraham taught the people and explained to them by means of speculative proofs. He was able to show that the world has but one God, that he has created all the things that are other than himself. God is the creator of everything. None of the forms, there's nothing else besides him. No created thing in general ought to be worshipped. Don't worship Avodah Zarah. This is what he instructed the people, and he brought those ideas to the front of people's minds, and he taught them these ideas, and he instructed them, attracted them by means of eloquent speeches. Remember, all this is not really recorded in the Torah. There's hints here and there, but this is Rambam's Avram Avinu that shows up many times in this book so far, and in the Mishnah Torah and his other writings, right? And by means of the benefits he conferred upon them. In other words, if you follow these ideas and these laws and you stop worshiping Avodah Zarah and you worship only the one true God, the creator of everything, and so on, that will benefit your life. You'll live a better, proper life, etc. But he never said, Avram Avinu never said, God sent me to you and given me commandments and prohibitions. Avram Avinu never told his people, these are the mitzvahs you have to keep. You got to keep Shabbos, you got to eat matzah on Pesach, and you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. He never said anything like that. Even, so right away, those are thinking, what about bris milah, right? God told Avram Avinu to do bris milah. And but if you think about it carefully, Rambam says, even when the commandment of circumcision was laid upon him and his sons and those who belonged to him, he circumcised them and his immediate family alone, and did not use the form of a prophetic call, right, to exhort the people to do this. He didn't say, now everyone else has to go ahead and do a bris milah, right? For you do not see the text of the Torah referring to him that reads, right, for I have known him, and so on, right? Thus it is made clear that he acted only through injunction. The fact that Avram Avinu had his descendants get a bris milah was through a tzavah, was through a command. And Avram Avinu said, I want my own family to circumcise themselves. If you look at the verses carefully, you'll see that the Rambam is carefully analyzing these words. It was Avram Avinu himself who decided, I want my family to circumcise themselves. But it was never that he said, God commanded me and told you that you have to keep these commandments for generation to generation. That we received later by our Sinai with the commandment to circumcise our children and the children's children, etc. Thus it is made clear that he acted only through, I said that. Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kahas, Amram also addressed their call to the people this way. All of the other prophets that we know of, they addressed the people in such a manner. They taught them ideas, lessons, concepts, right? But they never gave them a Torah. You will find likewise that the sages say, with reference to the prophets that came before him, the court of justice. It talks about the court of Aver, of Meshushelach, and so on. For all of them, peace be upon them, were prophets who taught the people through being instructors, teachers, and guides. But they did not say, the Lord said to me, speak to the sons of so-and-so. Things were like that before Moshe. That's how it was for all the prophets until Moshe Rabbeinu came around. Okay? But as for Moshe, it was a different story. And I just turned the page. I'm on 380 now at the top. As for Moses, he said, I'm on the fourth line. You know what was said to him, what he said and what all the people said to him. This day we have seen that God speaks, and so on. When people saw Moshe and they stood with Moshe at Sinai, then they took to themselves and they realized, right, that 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 now we see that God speaks to you, right? As for the prophets from among us who came, but before Moshe, they didn't see, right? So as for the prophets from among us who came after Moshe Rabbeinu, remember, I'm telling you, Rambam is saying that not only was there no one prior to Moshe that had that ability and that gave us a Torah, there was none post Moshe that had the same ability or gave us a Torah and told us and commanded us to live a certain way. So as for the prophets from among us who came after Moshe, you know the text of all their stories and the fact that their function was that of preachers who called upon the people to obey the law of Moshe. They told everyone to keep Torah's Moshe. Everyone that came after Moshe kept referring back to the Torah of Moshe. They taught and they rebuked us when it was appropriate. They gave us encouragement when it was appropriate. And they did all kinds of things to inspire us, to try to inspire us at least, to live the way that the Torah's Moshe told us to live, right? So they threatened those who rejected it, held out promises to those who were from observing it, but none of them came with a new Torah, right? Because that was a unique event in history. We likewise believe that things will always be this way. So we, as Jews, the Rambam is saying, believe that that's how it always will be, right? Moshe was a singular event, and nothing that preceded him was like him. And Moshe's telling us the Torah was a result of the specialness of Moshe, right? And that succeeding Moshe afterwards, nothing will ever replace what Moshe taught us. And that's the foundation of Judaism, okay? So as it says, it is not in heaven and so on, for us and for our children forever, as the Torah explicitly states that the Torah is meant to be for generations forever, never meant to be replaced, never meant to be thrown in the dustbin, right? And that is as it ought to be. And why is it that way? Because that's how it should be. For when a thing is as perfect as it is possible to be within its species, right? The Torah, because it is perfect and because it represents that true apprehension that Moshe had, which was as true as anything could ever possibly be, it's impossible that within that species there should be found another thing that does not fall short of that perfection, either because of excess or deficiency. Some other person might want to come up with a religion and add to this one and say, yeah, keep the Torah, but also do this, 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 and this, and this, right? No, but that's detracting, right? Because we already have the perfect Torah. Someone else might say, yeah, the Torah is okay, but not this part, not this part, not that part, making deficiencies in it. That also doesn't work. Perfection is perfection. So because the specialness of Moshe's nevuah is so different than the quality and the type of other prophecies, he received a Torah that was perfect. It can never be changed. Thus, in comparison with a temperament whose composition is of the greatest equibalence possible in the species in question, right? All other temperaments are not composed. So with this, I need to give a little bit of introduction. The Rambam follows Aristotle in his understanding and the way he describes the perfect way for a person to be in almost any trait, right? And the Rambam always goes through the middle road, the balanced road, right? Not too much. Too much of a good thing is bad. Too little of a good thing is not as good as it's supposed to be. So if you always need to find the middle path, right? So for Rambam, perfection and balance is almost synonymous. It's like the same word. Perfection and middle of the road is also synonymous. So here he's saying the Torah is that perfect balance, right? And the Rambam is going to go through a lot, and he'll tell us in a minute of the rest of this book describing why the Torah is that perfect balance. Right now, you have to take him for granted, but he's going to go into more detail, and you'll have to decide whether you're convinced or not, right? But these things are similar with regard to this law, this Torah, as is clear from its equibalence. When you look at the Torah, you'll see that the Torah is all about balance. For it says just statutes and judgment, right? Right? It's tzedek, it's just, right? The word tzedek is the same word. Now you know the meaning of just tzedek is equibalanced, is a scale, is tzodek, is correct when it's balanced, right? That's what the root of the word tzedek comes from. So the justice that we talk about tzedek is balance, and it uses a term that actually refers to the balance on a scale. For these are manners of worship in which there is no burden and excess, right? The way we worship God, it's not too burdensome, it's not too difficult, such as a monastic life and pilgrimage and similar things. Note that that's clearly pointing his finger at the same at the religions that push people to be and live a monastic lifestyle, right? Nor a deficiency necessarily leading to greed and being engrossed in the indulgence of appetites, so that in consequence the perfection of man is diminished with respect to his moral habits and his speculation. So the Torah leads us in the direction of a perfect balance. It doesn't tell us we have to go sit on a mountaintop, right? It doesn't tell us we have to, and it doesn't push us towards indulgence. It doesn't go either way. This being the case with regard to all the other nomoi of the religious communities of the past, right? The communities that existed prior to the Torah being given would push people in one direction or another, either too much into this world or too much separating from this world. When we shall speak in this treatise about the reasons accounting for the commandments, which we're going to get to mostly in book 3, when I discuss the Torah, I'm going to show you, I'm going to lead you through and teach you how this balance works. The equibalance and wisdom will be made clear to you insofar as this is necessary. In other words, I might not do everything, but as much as I feel I need to, I will show you how the Torah is that way. For this reason, it is said, the law of Torah Hashem Tamima, the law of God, Torah of God is perfect. As for those who deem that its burdens are grievous, if you happen to be thinking that, what do you mean? This Torah is not easy. The whole 8 days of Pesach, I can't have a sandwich, right? It's a pain in the neck, right? Shabbos, I can't, I can't go on a trip where I want to go. This is really burdensome. I got to eat kosher. I can't just go have a good piece of lobster, right? So if you think its burdens are grievous, right, heavy and difficult to bear, all of this is due to an error in considering them. You're making a mistake when you think about the Torah if you think that it's a burden. I shall explain later on how easy they are in true reality according to the opinion of the perfect. If you're a good person, you'll realize that the Torah is really easy. For this reason, it says, right? What is it that God really wants from you? Just to fear him, right? As it says, have I been a wilderness unto Israel? No, that's from Yirmiyahu, I think. Yeah, from Yirmiyahu, have I been too burdensome on you? However, all this refers to the virtuous. If you're a virtuous person, you'll realize that keeping the Torah is easy. Whereas in the opinion of those who are unjust, violent, and tyrannical, but if you're a bad guy, then of course you won't like the Torah and you're going to think it's a burden, right? The existence of a judge who renders tyranny impossible, God tells you don't be a tyrant, right, is the most harmful and grievous thing. So you're going to think the Torah is terrible because it's telling me not to be a tyrant. As for the greedy and the vile, the most grievous thing in their opinion is that which hinders their abandoning themselves to debauchery and punishes those who indulge in it. Right? I want to do all kinds of stuff. I want to be greedy. And the Torah tells you not to. So you don't like the Torah. Similarly, everyone who is deficient in any respect considers that a hindrance in the way of the vice that he prefers is because of his moral corruption. He thinks it's a great burden. Accordingly, the facility or difficulty of the law should not be estimated with reference to the passions of all the wicked, vile, morally corrupt men. Don't look at all those people that are trying to make excuses to justify their corrupt lifestyles, and they're telling you the Torah is a burden. Well, they're not exactly a good source if you want to know whether the Torah is easy or not. You should consider it reference to the man who is perfect among the people. Go to a person who's a good, kind, honest person, who lives in this world as much as is appropriate. He doesn't separate himself like a monk, but he also doesn't, do things that are inappropriate. Ask him or her whether or not the Torah is a burden, and you'll find out, and they'll tell you that it's not, that it's actually easy. Only that law is called by us divine law. That's the law that's called divine. And that's the perfect law that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us. And since it's perfect, as Rambam told us, it will never be replaced. Whereas the other political regimens, such as the Greeks and the Sabians and of others, are due, as I explained several times, to the action of the groups of rulers who are not prophets. The people that taught that, they were not prophets. So that what the lifestyles and the ideas and the religions that they taught were not proper, were not right. So that concludes chapter 39. We I guess I'll open the floor to questions. We got a couple minutes to go. So any questions or comments? Yeah, there was a lot there. The Rambam packed a lot into that chapter. But we now say it again.
I was recently asked about an idea that Rav Kook said about the four powers of our, I guess I'll call it soul, but it's really behavior. So it's reason, feeling, imagination, and will.
Okay.
And not in that order. And I only explained what I remembered from Rav Shirky. He said that that the prophet has to use more of the imagination, meaning it's not 25% of each by anyone, but the prophet has to use like more than 50% of imagination. And the example he gave was something that you mentioned, which was Jeremiah was actually asked about the first two visions. Are you seeing correctly? Right, like those weren't Hashem's words, but basically said "Ma ata roeh," right? So,
yeah.
So only after he was able to explain that his vision was exactly what Hashem wanted him to see, then he had a lot more, I'll call it freedom to say things without that kind of guidance or yeah. So but I agree with Jeff. I don't think that Yirmiyahu ever learned math or science, or like he was told that the power of his words are going to be the ones that will guide the rest of the people, and sometimes he'll get punished for it because, like you said, they don't want to listen.
All right. Yeah, more than pretty much every time he opened his mouth, he got he had there's Yirmiyahu is in it's a wonderful sefer to learn, but my father but said this to me a couple times, but you can see it. The one thing that you learn from Yirmiyahu is resilience. You know, I mean, you learn a lot of things from Yirmiyahu, but of all of the characteristics, resilience is probably the most glaring quality that he had as a person. You know, that no matter what, he kept on going. You know, no matter what God and the world threw at him, he stuck to his mission, and that's, you know, nothing deterred him. You know, and most people at some point would just give up, but he didn't give up. I mean, you know, to literally the last minute. You know, the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, Gedalia is dead, everything is gone, and the people decide to go. He stayed as their leader. He went with them to Egypt. Like no matter what, he just constantly kept going. As you know, but yeah, no, it's good. So next week I believe that we should be on the air. And then after that, I think is Pesach. I don't think I'll be able to do it Chol Moed. So I'll have one class or so after Pesach, and then in May I'll keep you informed. But in May I'm going to miss a couple weeks for this army mission in Germany. But we'll keep going. I'll keep communicating with everyone over the text messaging. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right.